Kia ora everyone, and welcome back to Humankind. So, you might find yourself in a very similar situation to the one that I'm in here, relatively frequently. The harrapans, very difficult to pin down. The AI loves to choose the harrapans. Why? Well, if you haven't seen my video on them, they're pretty dang good. Whole lot of food and a really wonderful canal network, which is basically 3 farmers' quarters in one, but, of course, the stability cost of 1. Their runners are fantastic too. Great culture. Can't recommend them highly enough. If you miss them, however, I'd like to focus today on these bad boys, the Egyptians. They are kind of like the harrapans, but for industry, right? So take a look. Harrapans. +1 food on tiles producing it and on rivers, and then they have a canal network, which is basically, like I say, farmer's quarter, but it provides +3 instead of +1. Now have a look at the Egyptians. +1 industry on tiles producing industry, and basically a maker's quarter, but +3 industry instead. However, you also get the added benefit of +1 influence, and their trait is a little bit different, -10 cost. Let's jump in and choose them because while they may not quite necessarily be better than the harrapans, and I do think there's some logic in pursuing growth first, building up your population, and then moving through. Actually, in this video, I'm arguing that the Egyptians are just as strong of a choice, and I would really seriously put both the harrapans and the Egyptians as the 2 S tier, indeed the 2 absolute god tier cultures in humankind's ancient era. Let's have a look why. So I've just spawned in an entirely random map, and as luck would have it, my spawn location is not particularly high on food, unless I want to head down here to this river, but actually it's pretty juicy. So I'm going to get a +20 +9, which for a lot of you've probably not played with a +20 +9 on your first spawn. Kind of difficult to do. By and large, it tends to be more +10 +10 on average. So I'm pretty stoked with that start. A lot better of starts than I get when I play live. That's another point for another day. But let me show you what they've got. So here, first and foremost, we have the Egyptian pyramid. And as I say, this thing, if we have a look at the maker's quarter, right? +1 +1 -10. Cool. Great. This one, though, +3 +3, +1 influence, and I'd also like to draw your attention down the bottom of this little box here, affinity bonus, +2 stability after completion. That's because the other key difference here between the Egyptians and the harrapans is, of course, the Egyptians are builders, right? And that gives us a few key things. First and foremost, we get stars for building districts instead of population, which is arguably easier. Secondly, depending on your start. Secondly, we can use the affinity action, which is basically the opposite of the harrapans. It prioritizes industry instead of food. And then lastly, here we have the affinity bonus, which is that 2 stability when you complete a district's construction. What does that mean? Well, it kind of means you're almost playing as Joe, as the Zhao Empire, because you're actually receiving +2 industry, +2 stability every time you build a district. So in effect, then, the Egyptian pyramid is in many ways actually +1 influence, +3 industry, plus the adjacency bonuses, and only a -8 stability, right? Now, granted, the harrapans can draw on similar things as well with their agrarian bonuses. And I would like to add, and again, I'd like to really reiterate here that the harrapans are top tier, just like the Egyptians, right? These guys are absolutely top tier cultures. But by and large, actually, I think that production may be more beneficial moving forward than food. Now, yes, obviously population is important, right? Particularly if you're going to want to build up, say, a standing army, right? You're going to need population for every standing army. But here's the thing. Once you snowball a few makers' quarters, have a look at these ones, right? They're fairly standard. I'm placing them around my unique district. And in fact, this wasn't even the best placement for the district because you can see, and top tip, there are 2 tiles here that I actually can't build on at all. So the maximum number of quarters I'm going to be able to build around it are actually very few. A better spot, of course, would have been to find somewhere that was an open, rocky field, right? Potentially up here. We'll send our scout around to have a look. Actually, here's a reasonable one on this encampment, yikes. Here you can see all of these tiles, particularly this one, right? +5, +3. What we might do, actually, is make this our second spot and have a play with a second Egyptian city and see if we can get it even more nuts. You have to remember, of course, this game has only just started, right? But back to my point. if you build your maker's quarters first, and this doesn't just go for an Egypt run either, you could do this with others. Of course, it'll be easier with Egypt because of those reduced stability penalties effectively by getting +2 stability, and many other things that make the Egyptians great. But by and large, actually, I've been moving more and more toward prioritizing production before food. Yes, of course, population is powerful, but I actually think that if you build a solid base of, look at this, we're already at 101 industry in our capital. We're making 9 money, 3 science, we're losing 3 food, but we'll fix that in a minute. But we're getting 101 industry. What does that mean? Well, it means I can do anything. I can literally do anything. So now that my population is starving, I've built up a reasonable base, a ridiculously overpowered base, dare I say. Now I can focus on food. And it's going to take me no time at all, right? I can build these districts literally in a turn. I can build the improvement in a turn. And even the notoriously expensive public ceremony is only going to take me 2 turns. Now, granted, I'm playing on fast speed. It may differ for you, but of course it all scales, right? If you're looking at this and it says 10 turns instead of 20 or whatever it said when you first started playing, it's the same difference. It's the exact same difference. I'm just playing on a faster speed, so I can show you how this scales with time in a much easier format. The other key thing to note about building highly productive outposts in the beginning, like this one here, is that because the outpost had high production, it built quickly. If you build an outpost somewhere where there's very low production, which I'll show you in a minute, it'll take many, many more turns for the outpost to get online. And that matters in the early game because you can use your influence to instantly connect the resources within it, right? So here you can see, for a measly 7 influence, which is less than 1 turn's worth, I can place this down on this resource here and instantly connect it to my empire. Now, what's that doing? Well, it's a pretty juicy tile, right? +3 gold, +2 industry, which is nice for my coffers in the early game. But more importantly, we've also just connected a gemstone. So now we're getting +4 stability and +2 money, and we wouldn't have been able to do that anywhere near as quickly if we'd focused on food first instead of industry, instead of production. The other beautiful thing about having really high production, if you don't want to build more districts because you can't quite handle the stability, which you will struggle with if you're massively productive and building districts everywhere before you get things like the Commons Quarter and perhaps more luxuries to connect, you can, of course, repeat the feast over and over and over and over again, and it will provide you with an additional 5 food consistently. Now, that's particularly useful here for me, right, where I'm sort of reaching my district cap, and maybe I want to focus on things that aren't going to decrease my stability further. That's where infrastructure, that's where feasts come in. And of course, units. Let's not forget that production equals faster units, right? 1 turn. I can spam out an army very quickly playing as the Egyptians, so long as I at least have a couple of people in the city at a time. You can see that not having these citizen slots filled isn't making a massive difference, right? Watch as I swap these citizens around. It's adding 6 industry, which is nice, but I've already got 101. So I don't actually need population to be working it at all. In fact, in many cases, when you're playing as the Egyptians, and here's a little extra for expert tips, it may be more beneficial to have all of your citizens manually in food while you focus on building a really strong, productive base here in the city. A really key tech for you to unlock as the Egyptians is going to be stoneworks, right? +1 industry on mountain, on stony fields, and on rocky fields. For this city here, the second one I've set up, this is going to be huge and really help to ridiculously snowball our production so early in the game. I'm going to purposefully settle this one in a fairly bad spot, but a spot that you might run into quite frequently, particularly, say, if you're in coastal areas, unlike me here in the middle of a really productive powerhouse of a map. If you settle this kind of spot, you know, it is fairly common. It was +14 food and very low industry. And this is the other way to play the Egyptians. If you don't want to snowball in and focus on one thing entirely, you can also go for the start somewhere that has high food and then use your innate ability to build production up. It's not my preferred approach. I totally understand if it's yours, but it's not mine. I think that snowballing in and really focusing on one resource will net you more benefit in the long run. And of course, you have to remember that we are playing a long run game here, right? This is Humankind. You're going to change cultures potentially 5 or 6 times in your playthrough. Starting off strong as the Egyptians in a highly productive culture can lead you anywhere afterwards. If you start with this powerful industry base, you won't regret it. And that's something that I'm finding increasingly more and more important the more I play Humankind and the more I get into this fantastic game. And you have to admit, right, so take a look here at Memphis, again, just to bring this point home. I could be building my farmer's quarters. There's a +6, that's okay. +2, but I lose 3 production. I can build some reasonable ones up here. I don't really have a lot of rivers to build on. I have one here, but it's only going to give me +2 because I've focused in already. But have a look at my maker's ones. +11. Woof. Right? +8. On that river, it was only going to give us +6 or even less food. You can see the power of snowballing through production, and then every now and again just throwing a feast in to keep the people happy, right? One important thing to note, of course, as you're working your way through, if you do end up settling somewhere with high food to try and balance out your empire, you can always attach the high food territory to the high production territory. Not only will that give you more opportunities to build your insane pyramids, which really are so strong, influence, stability, and production in one early game unit. It's nuts. But more importantly, you can start to sort of balance out your yields a bit as well, right? You might choose to use your highly sort of fruitful territory to feed the masses. But again, I just don't think it's worthwhile. I think you should absolutely beeline industry, building some garrisons where you need to as well to keep up your stability, right? Stability will be a problem when you're highly productive. But of course, because you're highly productive, it also becomes not a problem because everything that you're queuing up is only taking a turn to build, right? Like it's or, you know, whatever the equivalent is for your game speed. Honestly, one point that I just really want to hammer home here at the end of this video is that the Egyptians are absolutely nuts. And yes, the harrapans are very powerful, high growth, high population, very, very strong. But honestly, the more I play this game, the more I think that actually the Egyptians are the best culture to pick in the early game. And then, of course, as you move through into the classical era, you've got even more options. A couple of quick ones that I would recommend. If you want to really snowball down the production thing, go Maya. Now you'll receive +2 industry per workers on a city. So you can start to shift your pops into workers and build on that. Or +3 industry per number of attached territories, plus faith, plus an adjacency bonus. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to choose them. But, you know, other options are you might want to go for example, the Carthaginians. If you've got lots of coastline, this can be another good culture to build on that productive base. And then the other one that I would potentially recommend would be food focused. Here's looking at you Celts, right? You can still pick up on some of that food that you lost by moving through into the Celts into the next era. However, I would like to show you, I won't say it's perfectly balanced or it's broken because this is by design what Humankind is meant to do. But have a look at the Mayans. This is going to get really fun. If you're feeling really cheeky, you could also add in +2 industry on forest and woodlands. But maybe you want to balance out a bit of food. I don't though, so I'm going full production all day, baby. And don't even get me started on the fact that the pyramids of Giza provide a further 25% discount to industry cost, meaning that with this and your trait, you'll be permanently receiving over a third discount on all of your districts, and you've only just stumbled into the classical era. I literally just insta-completed the wander. What the heck? This is awesome. This is awesome. And if, like me, you push it a little bit too far and stability becomes an issue, don't worry. You can always fall back on your garrison. You can always station units in your city as well. But for the sake of this video, as it is turning into a bit of a meme of a video if I don't say so myself, I'm just going to spam down a few garrisons here. Might elevate them to the front of the list as well, just to accentuate it. Let's also, of course, use holy sites as well to help lift up. I'm actually so productive that I'm completing multiple districts in a turn, right? Meaning that, yes, these rebels have just spawned, but already I'm back above where I need to be in terms of my stability, right? Like, it's so quickly to get control of things because you build districts so fast, but equally, the downsides are just as severe. So do make sure that you keep a really close eye on your stability. But overall, I mean, look at this. Like, this is just absolutely fantastic. I'm nearly at 200 industry, and everything else is in single or double digits. Ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this, and the key takeaway here from me is the more that I play Humankind, the more I realize that we don't just have to focus on food, and in fact, I think that the industrial cultures, those who focus on production, like here in Memphis, where we now have 232 industry, I think these are the ones to look out for, to be honest. Because with production, everything else scales, to a much greater extent than it would with food. You can see here that the power of my individual pops to affect my yields isn't that great. But the power of districts and industry and production is much more impactful. Thank you very much for watching this Humankind video. Hopefully I taught you something new, or maybe something to go away and think about. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if there's a particular culture that I've missed or you'd like me to cover next, please let me know. And until then, I'll see you then. Take care and bye-bye.